Are you prepared to handle a Mayday? Let's watch and learn. All right, let's talk about department readiness. Is our department prepared and ready to handle a Mayday? Do we have policies on emergency traffic? Do we have policies on accountability? How about PARs, personal accountability reports? You see, if you don't have them, now's the time to reach out to your neighbors. Many of these fire departments and local communities around you already have policies in place. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Do you have an assigned rapid intervention team on scene? Some places call them rapid intervention teams, some call them rapid intervention crews, fast teams, or safety engines. But it's required. We need to have a team on standby in case one of our firefighters calls a Mayday. Do you know when your firefighters will call a Mayday? Ask around the kitchen table of your firehouse. You'll be surprised at some of the answers that you get. Firefighters will range from I will call a Mayday for the smallest little thing to firefighters that will refuse to call a Mayday for the sheer embarrassment of getting in trouble and not being able to get out of their own problem. You see, proactive rapid intervention team readiness directly relates to firefighter safety, and it's our job as incident commanders, as chief officers, as training officers to make sure that the team is prepared to handle the Mayday. One of the biggest challenges fire chiefs have is how do we afford the budget to train personnel, and how do we find those resources to put people in the street as a safety engine, as a RIT company? How can we do that? It all depends on your resources. Large cities, they strike an next greater alarm. They put a whole nother alarm company in the street as the RIT company. But in smaller rural areas, volunteer fire departments where manpower is at a premium, sometimes we can't afford to put people in the street to stand by to protect our own. We need each and every one of those bodies to actually be doing something on the fire ground. So the biggest challenge we have is how can we come up with the resources needed to manage a Mayday? And how we do that is we reach out to our neighbors. If I've got a manpower shortage in my community, and they do too, we need to cross-train with one another. We're going to do some rapid intervention training with them. They're going to do some with us. We're going to understand each other's equipment. We're going to get to know each other. And when we have a fire, they can be our rapid intervention team. And when they have a fire, we'll respond and be their rapid intervention team. That's the reality of rural United States fire service. Sometimes we just don't have enough people to handle all the things that we need to handle on the fire ground. All right, so I've paired up with my neighbors, and I'm going to ask them for help. They're going to be our rapid intervention team, and we're going to be theirs. What kind of incident command post resources do I need to manage a Mayday? You see, many good fire ground commanders have been operating at fires for many years. 2, 3, 4 alarms. Their span of control is amazing. But the first time that a firefighter goes, Mayday, 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 firefighter down, that puts a whole nother element onto that incident commander. And many incident commanders, many good incident commanders, failed miserably when those 3 words were said for the sheer fact that they went on stress-induced overload. So what I need for you to do is reach out to that neighboring community and ask their chief officers to respond with that engine that's going to help you with managing the Mayday, and take that chief officer and bring him to the command post. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we can take that chief officer and incorporate him into the incident command team in a minute. And lastly, some of the things that incident commanders have struggled with in the past so that we learn from other people's misery is the sheer fact that their command posts themselves sometimes will set them up for failure. In the photo provided here, what are you using for a command post? Does it range from sitting on the back of your Suburban or pickup truck with a portable radio and some accountability tags? Or does it range from a Suburban with a command post? Or in large-scale incidents where we have large command vehicles? You see, we can learn from one another. If we're working outside in the elements, the incident commanders oftentimes struggle with some of the stressors that the elements provide. For example, is the Suburban parked too close to the aerial ladder, and every time the aerial ladder is revved up to be operated, is the incident commander being hindered on hearing the radio? If I'm standing outside in the cold in the Northeast in the wintertime, what do you think my thought process is going to be when I am cold and shivering. As compared to, like you see in the photo, some people that are allowed to get into a command vehicle with a controlled environment with 100-watt radios and headsets that they're not going to miss a radio transmission. You might only have one opportunity to answer a firefighter that says, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday." Do you want to miss it? You see, one of the best incident commanders that I ever worked for in my very first fire department in my career, volunteer fire department here in New Hampshire, he had a Ford Taurus with a 100-watt mobile radio, and he ran command out of his personal vehicle. He would sit in the vehicle and position it so he could see the front of the building, and he would command the fire, and he would never get out of the car. You see, he had a 100-watt radio, a controlled environment, he had a heater when it was the wintertime, and he had an air conditioner in the summertime, and there was nobody bother him. No outside stressors, no cold, no rain, no wind, no vehicles revving up around him. Very smart individual, and he ran a heck of a good fire. All right, so looking back at some of the history of some bad fires, many good fireground incident commanders get caught in a bad place. You see, they get caught in a bad place because of stress-induced overload. They run good fires, they're at the tipping point of their span of control, and then firefighters call out, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, firefighter down." So what I've provided for you here today is a list. It's a quick bulletin of all the things that we're going to discuss in the remainder of this program. All right, our first step in the incident commander's flow chart on how to manage a Mayday is acknowledge the reported Mayday. So I got to ask you, what are you using for a command post? How about the environment that the incident commander is exposed to? And do we need to isolate ourselves from the incident even more? Mayday radio transmissions can often get missed or lost due to the fact that the incident commander is either overwhelmed in the command post by outside stressors, environmental, extra people that are hanging around the command post with face-to-face contact, or radios that are oftentimes too loud or too quiet, and that radio transmission gets missed. You got to control your radio frequency in the next step of the command process. After acknowledging the reported Mayday, the incident commander has got to have the confidence and the discipline to shut down all non-emergency radio traffic. You see, incident command can be easily overrun by an escalating incident, with firefighters calling in from all different disciplines when we really need to control the radio frequency and communicate just with the Mayday firefighter. So to prevent having stress-induced overload, when firefighter says Mayday, 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 and an incident commander gets locked up in his limbic mode of his brain and he can't think rational thoughts because of the stress, I recommend that you run this Mayday checklist. All right, what kind of information does the incident commander need to obtain? A lot of places are using lunar, obtaining the lunar. Let's break down the word lunar. The L stands for location or last known location of the firefighter. U, the unit number or designation. N, the name of the firefighter that's lost or missing. A, assignment, the assignment on the fire ground. And R, resources needed to rescue that firefighter that's down. All right, so let's break down lunar, because there's two different types of Mayday on the fire ground. There's a Mayday where a firefighter calls a Mayday himself. He is reporting firefighter down. Mayday, 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 firefighter down. And he gives the lunar information himself. My location is 3rd floor. My unit designation is Engine 2. My name is Greenwood. My assignment on the fire ground was search and rescue on the 3rd floor. And my resources needed is I have a firefighter who is down and I need help extricating him. That's practical evolution number 1. A firefighter is declaring a Mayday. He's in radio contact with me, the incident commander, and he knows where he is. But let's flip the coin. Many fire departments are not prepared to handle a Mayday where a firefighter is found to be lost or missing on a personal accountability report or a PAR. You see, every 15 or 20 minutes, fire chiefs, incident commanders, they will PAR the fire ground. That means they're going to account for everyone that's operating on all different levels of the building, and they're going to make sure that everyone is safe. So as we're operating through a PAR and we're doing a count of all the people on the fire ground, I come up short and I realize that firefighter Smith is missing. He was supposed to be on the 3rd floor. He's no longer on the 3rd floor and he's missing. He could be on the 3rd floor, trapped, lost, or disoriented, separated from his crew. Or he could have left the 3rd floor to come outside because he was running low on air. Regardless of what his situation is, me as the incident commander, I need to have a policy in place on how to handle a firefighter who is missing during a PAR. For example, if I don't have one, many good incident commanders in the street have been oftentimes waited too long to declare the Mayday for the missing firefighter because they went looking for them outside the building thinking that they were already out. So by policy and procedure, a good progressive fire department will have a policy relation to having a PAR and a missing firefighter. And it should go like this. This is Incident Commander Greenwood declaring a Mayday. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday for Firefighter Smith. He was from Engine 2. Firefighter Smith, last known location, 3rd floor, search and rescue. You see, when I announce that Mayday for Firefighter Smith, everyone on the fire ground starts to look around on the fire ground looking for Firefighter Smith. If he actually came outside of the building because he was running low on air or he needed a rehab, everyone's going to look around and go, hey, they're looking for you. We could have sent firefighters in going to find Firefighter Smith when he was never there. Oftentimes, when we don't have a policy that drives incident commanders to declare the Mayday for a missing firefighter, there's a big delay in getting the rapid intervention team into operation. The 4th step in this process, commit and deploy rapid intervention team number 1. We're progressive. I've got a 4-man rapid intervention team sitting outside the building, staged their tools and equipment close to the access point, and they're waiting to go to work. If I run a good fire, those firefighters never actually go to work, and I go home and everyone goes home safely. But if something happens to any one of the firefighters within the building and they declare that Mayday, those 4 firefighters are all I have between life or death, and I need to get them in there quickly. So, firefighter declares a Mayday. I've controlled my radio frequency. I've obtained the lunar information from the firefighter that's down inside. I commit and deploy rapid intervention team number 1. You see, at this time, it's not the time or place to locate my equipment. Command is responsible for the overall operations of the incident, and the rapid intervention team should have their tools and equipment staged in close proximity to the entry point. RIT should report to the incident commander when their team is ready and active on the fire ground. And a RIT size-up should include a good 360 of the building, looking at the building for access, egress, how many people are operating on the fire ground, and what's the potential hazards that are associated with building construction, fire behavior, fire dynamics. You see, what's the significance of the fire dynamics? The rapid intervention teams outside the building, they're monitoring conditions the entire time they're outside. They can actually watch for smoke conditions, color, volume, and velocity, and they can see whether or not things are about to go south long before the incident commander, in their view, in their overload of all the people that are talking to them, can see. So the rapid intervention team is a critical role on the fire ground, determining when they're going to go to work before it ever happens. All right, so let's look at this for a minute. We're at step number 5. It's called expand the incident command system. When rapid intervention team is staged on the tarp outside the building before the Mayday occurs, they're just a box in the incident command chart. It says RIT. But when they go to work and they go inside, who's responsible for them? The incident commander is responsible for them unless he has provided them and provided the fire ground with an operations officer. If an operations officer is in play, then RIT works for them. But it gets even more confusing because when the RIT team goes to work and they don't have a RIT rescue branch officer that's going to answer the radio on that tarp for them, then the operations officer is going to lose span of control and get overwhelmed too. So if you're running a good fire and a Mayday occurs, your span of control can easily be overrun. You see, whether you're the incident commander or the operations officer, before a Mayday occurs, your mindset is all about tasks and tactics and getting things done. But when those 3 words happen, Mayday, 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 that's going to take this to a whole new level, and it's going to bring you on stress-induced overload. So we must prepare. We have to front load our command staff. We have to understand that the RIT team that's staged has to have a RIT rescue branch officer. So as I said at the very beginning, If you're going to share resources with your neighboring community, ask them for a company of 4 to be your RIT team. Also ask them to send a chief officer with them that when they respond with them, will stage with them. The team will go to work and the chief officer will become the RIT rescue branch officer. All right, let's talk about Fireground Incident Command flowchart. The span of control is 3 to 7. The optimum span of control is the number is 5. That means the number of people or companies that we can keep track of before we lose span of control or accountability for. But let's think about this. When we have a fire and we're running the most basic form of a flowchart, which I have right here, I got an incident commander, I got fire attack, backup, ventilation, I've got a RIT team on standby, and I've got an ambulance or an EMS company in staging. That's the most basic form of a 5-box incident command system. The incident commander's running on his 5 for span of control. So I've got 4 members staged in RIT. They've got a tarp out, they have all their tools and equipment out, and they're staged somewhere close to the access and egress point of the building. And those 3 words happen: Mayday, 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 firefighter down. The incident commander is going to deploy that RIT team. That's going to become RIT team number 1. All right, so I've committed and deployed RIT team number 1. I've had a Mayday. I've deployed the RIT team that was staged on the tarp, who's located near the access and egress point of the building. When I deploy them, I got to support them immediately. When I deploy them, though, they have nobody to report to other than me. So to front load my command post, I'm going to ask that neighboring community when they send a RIT company to come with a chief officer as well. So let's see. Let's look at the chart. Prior to the Mayday, this is going to say RIT in the simple 5-box form. But when I deploy them, the team that goes in is going to become RIT team number 1. The chief officer that was deployed with them becomes the RIT rescue branch officer. RIT 1's going to report to them. And then I, as the incident commander, are going to support the RIT rescue branch officer by finding some more personnel to support the Mayday operation. All right, so let's look at that span of control again. Let's go back to the chart and understand why incident commanders, good incident commanders, get overwhelmed in stressful situations. So here we are, we're back at the 5-box chart. The incident commander is maintaining span of control for 5 companies. Fire attack, backup, ventilation, the RIT team is on stage and standby, and the EMS ambulance is on scene. When RIT 1 gets deployed and they go to work, if I'm the incident commander and I so choose to keep this all to myself without putting a RIT rescue branch officer in place, let's look at it real quick. I make these guys RIT 1, they go to work. And I'm a progressive incident commander and I ask for more manpower from the staging officer so that I can backfill them with RIT 2 and RIT 3. And I chain them all together. My span of control now goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 7. And I got 7 companies trying to communicate with me, and I'm trying to maintain span of control, and I'm going to get overwhelmed. All right, as it pertains to our previous ICS flowchart that I just drew out, let's look at this photo of a single-story ranch residential fire. This is the most basic form of a 5-box fire. But as a firefighter Mayday occurs, when someone says Mayday, 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 firefighter down, you can now understand how quickly this single-story residential fire will escalate and overrun the incident command system. Now in commercial occupancies, as seen in this photo, the span of control is already running on the upper limits. You see, access and egress in commercial occupancies aren't really designed for life safety. We have overhead doors, highly secured buildings. We have high hazard chemicals, storage, all the stuff that's associated with commercial occupancies that are going against us in the firefighter safety world. So the reality is when a firefighter declares a Mayday in a commercial occupancy, your span of control is going to be overrun that much quicker. All right, so let's look at, in the flow chart, how can we front load our command posts? You see, can one incident commander handle a Mayday and handle the fire? The answer is yes, if a Mayday occurs and that Mayday is resolved in 30 seconds. But as that Mayday evolves and 30 seconds turns into 3 minutes, and 3 minutes turns into 30 minutes, the stress levels increase and the number of people and resources that we put on the fire and the Mayday will overwhelm the incident commander. So what positions need to be filled? What positions need to be created in the command staff so the incident commander can have a possible chance of a successful rescue? Let's take a look at the airline industry and crew resource management. All right, so the airline industry has adopted crew resource management and how the airline is going to manage a Mayday with an aircraft. The International Association of Fire Chiefs have adopted crew resource management, and that training material is available to you if you seek that out. But let's look at the 5 main factors of why crew resource management is so successful in the airline industry. All right, the first factor is communications. In the airline industry, they talk about speaking directly with respect and responsibility. You see, there's a sender, a message, a medium on how to get that message there, and a receiver. But oftentimes, without feedback, the sender never knows if the message actually was heard. The next factor is situational awareness. What is situational awareness? It's the perception, observation, and stressors on personnel. The dynamics that require our full attention to detail so that we can resolve an issue. All right, decision making. The risk-benefit model is made from incoming information. Sometimes there's too little information for the incident commander to obtain to have a successful rescue, and sometimes there's too much and the effects of having too much information with stress-induced overload. Teamwork. Failure to work as a team is eventually doomed to fail. Good team training focuses on leadership and followership modeling. That's why it's so important that we prepare our firefighters with good policies, procedures, training in firefighter Maydays so that we have a successful rescue. And the last factor, barriers. Any factor that inhibits the first 4 factors. That can be external, like physical, like we've talked about earlier, the weather, the cold, the rain, the snow, outside stressors of noise, or internal, such as prejudices, opinions, attitudes, and stress. And how this applies on the fire ground is that the incident commander, the operations officer, the safety officer, and the rescue branch officer have to come together and operate under these 5 main principles of crew resource management. In regards to communication, if I've already afforded myself a RIT rescue branch officer, communications is important between command, operations, safety, and the RIT rescue branch officer. And if the RIT team number 1 needs to provide communications through a form of medium, a radio transmission, and they report it to the RIT rescue branch officer, they're less likely to have informational overload when the RIT rescue branch officer is only focused on the rescue, as compared to sending that message to the incident commander who is also operating and controlling the rest of the fire. How this applies in respect to situational awareness is that the RIT rescue branch officer is going to be afforded the luxury of knowing who RIT team number 1 is. He's had the opportunity to talk to them. He knows their training levels. He understands their abilities and capabilities. When he goes to work and they actually are working for him, his situational awareness is on the rescue. It's not on the overall fireground scene. In regards to decision making, this is a good one because the risk benefits analysis is based on the people who are inside the building, and they need to communicate that back outside. If they are communicating it to the RIT rescue branch officer, he or she could make good, solid decisions on go and no-go in this operation on the facts that are coming in without being overwhelmed with all the other information that's coming in from the remainder of the fire. Looking at the crew resource management model for teamwork. When the RIT rescue branch officer is only focusing on RIT team number 1, 2, and 3, the teamwork factor can be compounded. What that means is when RIT team number 1 goes to work and they find a firefighter that's buried underneath rubble and they need specialty equipment, they can communicate to the RIT rescue branch on what their needs are. The RIT rescue branch officer can communicate with teams 2 and 3 to obtain that specialized equipment in a timely manner to effect a rescue, as compared to that information going to the command post and being overwhelmed with all the outside stressors. And the last point, barriers. In respect to barriers, we need to understand that if I can take and seclude myself and take myself out of the picture of running the rest of the fire, running the fire ground operation, running the search and rescue, running the ventilation tactics, running all the divisions and sectors, and I only focus on the RIT rescue branch in RIT's team 1, 2, and 3, my barriers are going to be far less. All right, so crew resource management modeling. In this photo, it shows exactly how it works. The goal here is to avoid the problems before they occur. And if we can do that, we're going to trap those problems in their act, long before a firefighter ever gets hurt or killed. And if we've done that, we've mitigated the problem before it occurs. So let's look at it from a command standpoint. The incident commander at a traditional fireground scene is a solo individual who's operating on the fireground. It's his fire, it's his mindset, it's one set of eyes that are looking at the fire. But if we look at overlaying crew resource management modeling to the fire service with a pilot and co-pilot mentality, let's look at it this way. What's the pilot's job in an aircraft when they're flying the plane? If you look at their business model, their job is to get the plane from point A to point B on time so the customers are happy. During an emergency with that aircraft, while it is flying, it is the co-pilot's job to mitigate the emergency. You see, if the pilot, the captain of the plane, had to put the plane on autopilot to then look at the operational manual on how to mitigate an unsafe landing gear indicator of the front nose gear, he would lose focus on flying the plane and making sure the customers were happy. If we look at that in the fire service, the incident commander is the captain. He's flying the plane. The RIT rescue branch officer, that chief officer from the neighboring town, is the co-pilot flying the plane. And if I put a co-pilot in the RIT rescue branch operation, I will reduce my span of control and I'll be afforded the ability to avoid problems because the RIT rescue branch officer will communicate with RIT 1, RIT 2, and RIT 3. They'll trap acts before they occur, and then we will mitigate problems before anyone ever gets hurt or killed. All right, step 6 on the Mayday flowchart for the incident commander is notify dispatch of an active Mayday. Many good incident commanders got overwhelmed and never told dispatch that we had a firefighter down. But you see, the incident command system and how it works, dispatch is a big function of the ICS system. They are a resource allocation for us. They can get us tools, equipment, and manpower in a timely manner. When you notify dispatch of an active Mayday, they can provide you with more manpower and more equipment as needed. Notifying dispatch literally takes 20 seconds of your time to let them know that you have an active firefighter down with a Mayday. If you don't, you're placing a bet that your resources you have on scene are going to be capable enough to rescue one of your own. And if you lost that bet, we're going to lose one of our own. Step 7 on our incident commander's flowchart for managing a Mayday, place the fire on an alternate tactical frequency. If you have the capabilities of doing this, this will actually help the incident commander with his span of control. You see, the RIT rescue branch officer and RIT team number 1 are going to go to work on tactical frequency number 1. Let's just say the firefighter that got in trouble was operating on the fireground on TAC 1. When he declares that Mayday and he says, Mayday, 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 firefighter down, that firefighter owns that frequency. Once we deploy RIT 1 and they go to work and the RIT rescue branch officer is commanding and coordinating the rescue, the incident commander, the person who's in charge with the rest of the fire, he has to declare to dispatch he has an active Mayday and request an alternate tactical frequency. Mayday operations should remain on the fireground frequency that they were declared upon. You see, everyone else on the fireground, 90% of the people that are on the fireground who are not involved in the Mayday, they have the luxury of changing their radio frequency to an alternate frequency and then resuming their fireground operations. If we don't move to an alternate tactical frequency, just imagine the amount of radio traffic on tactical frequency 1, with firefighters trying to communicate that they're in trouble, firefighters on the remainder of the fire ground continuing to try to communicate their suppression, their ventilation, their search and rescue reports. The tactical frequency will become overwhelmed. So in conclusion on changing to an alternate tactical frequency, one of the common problems with this, with the command post, is does your command post have the capabilities of monitoring 2 tactical frequencies? If you do, then that's great, and I suggest that you train upon that during training. When firefighters declare the lunar report and the active Mayday in training, the incident commander should also change to an alternate frequency and have other firefighters simulate fireground radio communications so that they can practice operating on 2 separate frequencies. The next step in our managing the Mayday flowchart is requesting an additional alarm assignment. You see, if I have a checklist and I can check these boxes as this is occurring, the incident commander can stay on track. Requesting an additional alarm assignment is going to afford me with more personnel and more manpower on scene for future problems. The future problems could be that I have to rescue more people because the active rescuers also got in trouble too. We also have to remember that once a firefighter has declared a Mayday, a lot of the firefighters that are on the fire ground are going to know that individual. They're going to become very overwhelmed with the stresses that are involved with that too. Once I've recovered the firefighter successfully or not, the challenge becomes, do I have enough manpower to continue to operate on this scene to mitigate the original emergency? And what I mean by having enough firefighters is, do I have enough functioning firefighters on the fire ground to continue to function when one of their own was in trouble? Step 9 of the incident commander's model for managing a Mayday is a big one. Fire command must obtain a fireground operational PAR. Let's think about this for a minute. The RIT Rescue Branch Officer has RITs 1, 2, and 3 going to work. And if they're all fully staffed, that means there's 4 on RIT team number 1, 4 on RIT team number 2, and 4 on RIT team number 3. That's 12 personnel. He knows that he has to manage and account for 3 companies. But the fire service is a unique situation. We're not single resource deployers, meaning that we deploy people in a buddy system. So when I have a firefighter down and declares a Mayday, or I have a firefighter down and someone else declares a Mayday for him or her, we're more likely to have an additional firefighter down because we work in the buddy system. You see, if I don't obtain the PAR, if I'm missing 2, I might find out later on that I'm actually missing 4. So it's very important that once I ask everyone to transfer to an alternate tactical frequency, the incident commander, the person who's in charge of the entire scene, he needs to make sure that they obtain a personal accountability report, a PAR, for everyone on the fire ground. We have to take that radio transmission and account for every person on the fire ground to make sure that we're not missing any additional firefighters. So let's talk for a moment on obtaining a PAR, a personal accountability report. What are you using for accountability tags? What kind of accountability system are you using? Each jurisdiction in parts of the country, they all do something different. It's important that you, the incident commander, knows the resources that are available to you. One of the biggest challenges when trying to figure out who's missing and who's not is having a good system that will work under a high-stress environment. All right, who is my resource in the command post that can assist me with accountability? Hopefully, you've assigned someone to the accountability officer position. The incident commander having a person right next to him, a liaison that's going to take tags like this and they're going to put it on a board. I'm going to put this tag on first floor if I'm operating on the first floor. And if I do good communications, this tag's going to go to the second when I call command and say that we're going to the second floor. And then it's going to go to the third. When something bad happens and I have to do a personal accountability report of everyone on the fire ground, this system is only as good as the communications that come with it and also the person who's operating at the incident command post running the accountability board. And let's talk about tags for a second. I got a tag here. I also have a photo that I'm providing you. What type of system are you using? Because if all the tags are going on one hook, it turns into a toe tag system. So remember, your accountability board has to have divisions and sectors, whatever you call them in your jurisdiction. We have to have a good accountability system, and these tags, the importance of these tags cannot be stressed enough. When I train firefighters all over the country on how to do an accountability system, this tag is the key to your car. At the end of this day, when you want to go home, if you can't find your keys, you can't leave. If you don't have a tag, you can't play on the fire ground. Looking at the crew resource management model that I just showed you, the incident commander, if he uses his resources to his advantage, can oftentimes assign somebody to accountability and take this burden, this stressor, or this barrier off of his or her plate. You see, they got to coordinate the fireground scene, they're providing communications on the fireground scene, and if they're also trying to do accountability on the fireground scene, one of those three are going to suffer. Remember, incident commanders, the measure of success isn't the amount of things that you control and handle yourself. It's how you delegate them for the overall success of the mission. All right, the 10th step in the incident commander's model on how to manage a Mayday is establishing RIT teams number 2 and 3. What's the significance of 2 and 3? Why do we need them? The reality is, if I'm sending 4 firefighters inside the building to rescue one of our own, I still have other firefighters that are operating on the fire ground, so they need to be protected with a standby team as well. Furthermore, studies have shown that it takes about 12 firefighters on average to rescue one of our own if they're in more than 150 feet. So if I have a firefighter that's lost, trapped, disoriented, where I have to locate them, that's going to take some time. And RIT 1 probably won't have enough air in their air bottle to locate, package, and remove that firefighter all by themselves. So me, being the incident commander, with the forethought and thinking forward that I'm going to have to backfill them with RIT 2 and 3 to support RIT 1 and also support the rest of the fireground. So where do I get these personnel? I could barely scrounge up having enough personnel to have RIT 1 and put 4 firefighters on standby. The reality is, if you don't have the manpower to fill RITs 2 and 3, then you have to have a good working relationship with the staging and rehab officer. You see, once RIT 1 goes to work, I need to locate 4 personnel for RIT 2 very quickly. I can get them from manpower staging, or I could get them from the rehab officer. And RIT 3, they need to come along shortly after RIT 2. I need to put 12 firefighters on the fire ground to effectively rescue one of our own if they can't successfully rescue themselves. The other significance of RIT 2 and 3 is the ability to provide support for RIT 1. With good communications, with RIT 1 communicating to the RIT rescue branch officer, they can communicate the needs of the efficient rescue. They might need lifting and jacking. They might need cribbing. They might need specialty cutters. They're not bringing all that in with them. RIT 1 is a light, fast reconnaissance team that's trying to locate a firefighter that's down. If they can bring them air and extend their life, they've successfully effected their rescue. If RIT 1 needs some specialty equipment, RIT 2 and 3 have the ability on the outside of the building to go and find that equipment from all these fire trucks that are on the scene. And lastly, if RIT 1 successfully removes the firefighter from the IDLH environment, they're all heroes. But the reality is, we're not going to ask RIT 1, who just completed a rescue, to then retake their position and take up the standby position for the rest of this fireground operation. So RIT 1 is going to take that firefighter to EMS, and they're going to handle that firefighter's problem. RIT 2 is going to now stage that tarp and continue to maintain the safety crew for the rest of the fire. RIT 3 could be re-implemented back into the manpower staging pool, and that's the importance and the significance of having RIT 1, 2, and 3. The incident commander is doing a great job supporting RIT 1, but the reality is the incident commander also has to be able to support the entire Mayday operation. The reality is RIT 1 being light, fast, and a reconnaissance team, they're going to find the firefighter quickly, and they are also going to find out what that firefighter needs. Supporting the Mayday from the command post, I need an incident commander that's going to project the future, going to forecast the future. Where are we going to be in 20 minutes? If I can see the future and anticipate that I'm going to need specialty equipment or more manpower, supporting the Mayday operation by striking another greater alarm is pretty significant in the overall rescue mission. And lastly, but not least, announce the end of the Mayday. Incident commanders that forget to do this oftentimes will burden and provide additional stress on firefighters on the fire ground because they didn't terminate the end of the Mayday. So let's think about this for a minute. If I'm operating on the fire ground and I heard that there was a Mayday and I wasn't part of the Mayday operation of RIT 1, 2, and 3, and I never heard a termination of the Mayday, I'm going to think the entire time I'm operating on this fire ground that one of our own is inside the pile. That's going to take away my focus on my task or my assignment that I'm currently operating at. One of the benefits of announcing the termination of the Mayday is the sheer fact that human dynamics will say that as time expands, we will see more and more freelancing on the fire ground. If I've successfully removed a victim from the fire ground and I've removed them and I've provided them with care and treatment with the EMS division, if I terminate that, they'll be less likely to see freelancing on the fire ground. In the event that you have a firefighter that becomes lost during a PAR, the incident commander is doing a personal accountability report on the fire ground every 15 or 20 minutes, depending upon your jurisdiction. When I come up with firefighter Thomas, who is missing, when I search through all of the tags that I have on my accountability board and I announce the Mayday and I start the Mayday operation for the search for firefighter Thomas, and he gets located immediately, think about how important it is for me to then terminate that Mayday, because everyone else on the fire ground is going to continue to think that firefighter Thomas is still lost. So the importance of announcing the end of the Mayday is significant for not only the Mayday operation, but it's significant for also having good, solid fire ground discipline for the remainder of the operation. The initiation and the transmission of a firefighter distress signal, those words, Mayday, 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 produce more stress and potential chaos on the fire ground than any other singular event that ever is going to occur throughout some good incident commanders' careers. What can we do to prevent that and reduce our chances of losing one of our own? 3 simple steps. We need to develop good, solid Mayday procedures. We need to train everybody on those procedures, and then we need to implement an incident action plan like the chart, the Incident Command Managing a Mayday flow chart that I've provided you here today. Be a progressive incident commander. Feel free to print out this command flow chart and put it in your command post.